For Gardening with Friends, we're headed to Phipps, Conservatory, and Botanical Gardens to see Van Gogh in bloom. We're going to see what a designer does with the paintings to interpret them into a beautiful garden room. But we're also going to talk to a curator from the Frick who will explain the significance of the paintings themselves.
Van Gogh and Phipps go hand in hand. Van Gogh once said, "If you truly love nature, you will find beauty everywhere." And that's really what we try to do here at Phipps too, is just inspire our visitors with the beauty of nature. And Van Gogh is just so enthralled with plants and landscapes that he just had to capture them on his canvases. So we wanted to bring that kind of liveliness and infatuation with plants to the conservatory.
Talk a little bit about the process of picking the paintings. How did you know which ones to pick?
That was the most fun process, picking paintings and pairing them with our display rooms. So I really had to kind of think about the spaces that we have to feature here. Something like the Serpentine room, which is a long, winding room, really goes with some of his paintings that feature more undulating landscapes. Our East room, which has a permanent pond riverbed, I really wanted to select a painting that would go well with that. What we did here in the Serpentine room is create a 26-foot long, 8-foot tall vertical wall, and that actually acts as the sky for the painting. So picking whites and blues and silvers to really represent the big clouds of the painting, and then selecting a whole mix of perennials, annuals, and tropicals to make this come together. I love the use of Calamagrostis Carl Forrester in this room because it gets that seed head that almost looks like wheat. So you get the idea of a wheat field in this room. But of course, this is a flower show. So we want to show off all of those flowers. I love the golden shrimp plant in this room. It has that very upright yellow flower. And when I think of wheat fields, you know, walking by, you think of like upright movement. So I really wanted to use plants that kind of captured that essence.
Well, you know, I'll tell you a secret. It is only because of my career.
We Fill with Cypresses is one of the paintings he makes while he's at Saint-Remy, which is when he voluntarily commits himself for about a year to be hospitalized. And he keeps painting, and a lot of times he's painting from his room. There are, you know, views of the back of the hospital with a distinctive wheat field and fence. He starts painting cypress trees. He felt it was a perfect summer landscape, and I think we do too. The color is pretty naturalistic. It has one of those, you know, inimitable, crazy Van Gogh skies, or you can try to imitate it, but you're not going to get it. All these swirls and curves, but you know, a blue sky with clouds in it. They've done a fun job of trying to evoke that here.
It mirrors the painting. When
Absolutely.
You look at the painting.
Yeah, absolutely. It captures that shape. Starry Night by far is the most famous painting by Van Gogh.
So the pressure's on in interpreting this one. Talk about turning a room into a painting.
Absolutely. Probably the most iconic part of the Starry Night is the swirling sky. So capturing that in the vertical wall was interesting as well. So I really wanted to use a contrast between like a silver foliage and a dark purple foliage of the heuchera and sweet potatoes on the planter wall to really capture those big swirls and movements. And then really using dark foliage, blue flowers, with hints and spots here and there of yellows and oranges to represent the lights down in the town that you see.
There's a house at Auvers.
Do you feel like you're in France?
Yes. That's the idea, right?
That's the idea. This is the South Conservatory. This is our largest display space. So I really wanted to choose a painting that had a large focal point. Obviously the houses here were custom built to match what you see in the painting. But I really wanted to include something unexpected. So no one expected us to plant the roofs of these houses. We essentially had to build houses with planters on top. The house here is made up of blue evolvulus. That's 600 individual plants that make up the roof.
This is one of his final paintings. When Van Gogh moves to Auvers, it's the final 2 months of his life, and it's an incredibly, you know, we might say today a manic, happy kind of phase. He produces like 80 paintings in the course of the 2 months before his death. So he's, you know, painting with incredible determination and zest and vigor. There's a lot of things that seem to be going right in his life. So there's this interest in structure. When we think of Van Gogh, I think we think of, you know, sort of three key things: color, the intensity of color, the use of complementary colors. We think about brush strokes, choppy brush strokes, thick brush strokes, impasto, the physical act of painting. You can almost, sometimes when you look at his paintings, put yourself in his position and imagine the way his hand is moving while he's painting. And then I think the third thing is a kind of combination of all that, which is intensity. I think we respond a lot to Van Gogh's passion, and you see his passion in his work.
So what is the painting behind us? Because it looks pretty darn good.
The Red Vineyards near Arles. And surprisingly, this is the only painting that Van Gogh ever sold in his lifetime.
Really?
Yeah.
Talk about interpreting it in flowers.
Well, in the painting, there's a gradation from red to orange to yellow, and Van Gogh kind of uses that to create distance. So here we've literally translated that with a gradation of red geraniums and red ixora off to orange calibrachoa and down to yellow macrodonia.
And again, with a room this size and being here so long, this salvia and
is going wild.
nuts.
Yes, I love it. This is grandstand salmon, and just a really great color to capture the salmon color of the painting. These topiary figures are made out of succulents and dried material, and we custom made the frames to give them movement and look like the field workers in the painting.
I love the Red Vineyard near Arles because I think it has this decorative quality. Van Gogh goes to Paris in 1886, and it's transformative because he sees the work of the Impressionists. He's in conversation with these French artists. This is when his use of color becomes more daring, experimental, more emotional maybe. He's also, and it's not an erratic kind of thing, he's also involved in the color theories of his friend Georges Seurat, who of course is a famous pointillist. So all of this kind of transformation happens to Van Gogh's art when he goes to Paris in 1886. But all of these artists are really interested in Japanese woodblock prints. So when I look at Red Vineyard at Arles, there's this decorative sense of his use of complementary colors, these wonderful warm orangey red vines with these blue figures, totally complementary colors interspersed in this rhythm. Apparently the harvest would have been over, so those figures he's planted in there very, very carefully for compositional effect. There's a lot of heavy black outline, which for me echoes the kind of qualities of a woodblock print. I think it's a masterful use of color and composition, and just beautiful.
So one of the things that I learned about this painting that I didn't know before starting this whole process is that the reflections in the water are actually reflections from the street lamps across the way. And street lamps were new in the city of Arles, which allowed Van Gogh to paint at night, really expanded his opportunity to paint throughout the day.
So definitely one thing that had to be in here were street lights, right?
Yes, yep. And they are flickering to almost look like the gas lamps of the 1850s. This looks really cool in the evenings on Friday night.
Starry Night over the Rhone is, you know, it's a night scene, so it's a much more limited palette. You have a lot of these wonderful, rich, deep blues. He's really kind of experimenting with or exploiting the aspects of artificial lighting and these beautiful reflections on the water. I feel like the night scene in that limited palette of those reflected yellows, those rich sort of tapestry of blues, I think you can think almost of his brush strokes and that rhythm of his brush strokes almost like a tapestry, almost like stitches, you know, knitting a composition together, also conveying a sense of emotion often in their, you know, application. But you have these little figures in the foreground who you could read it as romance, some, you know, a couple out at night on their own. You could read it as the sense of the only two people in the world. I think everybody maybe has magic moments in their life like that too, where they feel like the world is there just for them.
What was the most fun thing about putting this all together?
Well, Van Gogh was my favorite artist growing up, so this is really just like both passions combined in this show. And for me, the most fun was selecting plants as my palette to essentially paint in our display rooms. Really fun.
Great show.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.